Hey everyone, it's Hawk, back again with another tier list, this time for Dorwinion. They are one of my personal favorite factions, so I am quite excited to do this one. Just one really quick thing before we get started is I am starting to get a lot of requests for a lot of different factions, so if you've requested a faction and I don't get to it right away, it is coming, don't worry, I will do all factions. It will just, I can't put these out all the time, so I will get to your faction in due time. Without any more doing, let's get started first with the Vineyard Levies. And the Vineyard Levies. F tier. The Vineyard Levies are F tier, of course, because, first of all, they're just brown. They have nothing special about their looks, so there's nothing that makes them stand out there, and they are just trash. Now, there is a place for trash. They have 2-6 for their stat line, which isn't complete garbage. They're not the Snaga that we had last time, but it's still just not a great unit. Really is just garrison duty or to supplement your armies with something dirt cheap, a little bit of cannon fodder. But compared to an overall pretty solid roster, the Vineyard Levies are just bad. They're just bad. And really, the brown, everything else looks so nice with the purple and the gold, and then they're just brown. So the Vineyard Levies are coming into F tier. Then we have the Vineyard Bowmen, and the Vineyard Bowmen are also pretty poor early game archers. So stat-wise, they would be D tier. But the reality is you're going to be training a decent amount of these in the early game because they are your only actual archer. Because your Thorn crossbowmen are crossbows, which are definitely better than your Vineyard bowmen. But the Vineyard bowmen will give you some standard arrow fire, and they have quite a large unit size, which means you can supplement your armies with their missiles. Also, they're not complete trash in terms of archers. They have 18 missiles, 150 meter range, 2 missile attack. Still pretty bad. Stat-wise, they're definitely D tier. They don't look that special at all, but you will be training a lot of these guys in the early game to be able to supplement yourself with some archers. Now we come on to the real bread and butter of your roster, and that is the Thorn Bladesmen. If I can type them into the EDB here, there we go, or the EDU. The Thorn Bladesmen are solidly C tier, but pushing B tier. They first of all all the Dorwinion units, they look amazing. They have the purple, like Byzantine kind of look, the cool shields. I really like the look of all the Dorwinion roster in general. And the biggest thing is that they're just quite solid infantry. They are 6'10", so they are Gondor infantry basically, and they have the stats and the cost to back it up. They cost an average amount, they have average stats, they are just a good unit, and there's nothing more you could want. They are just solid. And they will definitely kill things. They will keep up with the early game units of Rune, the Dire Tire Warriors or the Are You Lad Dragon Guard. So just a solid unit. They are quite average, but they will get the job done. They do what they do well. Now we come on. All these units are out of order. We have the Thorn Guard. Now, the Thorn Guard are also going to be C tier. They are just a good unit. They are more defensive. They have a 3 attack with a 9 defense, but they are armor piercing, a halberd unit. Nothing else to be said. They have pretty middling stats for a early tier halberd unit, even pushing the lower end, but still having a halberd unit is quite useful, and having an armor piercing unit is so helpful for fighting against Rune, who have quite heavily armored units, especially as you get into their Loke units with their golden armor. A lot of their defense gets put into the armor stats, so having an armor piercing infantry unit is quite important. And so the Thorn Guard, again, are just a solid unit. They can hold the line. They are about as average as it gets. So, C tier. Average as it gets. That's it. Then we have the Thorn Crossbowmen. Thorn Crossbowmen, one more time, are C tier. Nothing else to be said. They are average one more time. They have a 6 missile attack, and they have 6 defense. So really, they're really not that good in melee. They only have a 3 melee attack with a 6 defense, which is quite poor. That's only 1 melee attack better than your Vineyard Levies. So they're quite poor in melee, but a 6 missile attack that is armor piercing for early game crossbows is pretty good. They have a decent unit size. They're not too expensive. So you don't really lose too much. And like I said, armor piercing is really, really helpful against Rune. They look great with the purple and the mail, the Byzantine sort of look. I really like the look of all the Thorn units. But yeah, your early mid tier is really just quite average. It's about as average as it gets for Dorwinion with your mid tier units. And the Thorn Riders are going to be no exception. The Thorn Riders are C tier. Again, they are average early game cavalry. They have a 4 melee attack with a 5 charge, and they have a 9 defense. So, as far as early tier, I cannot talk. As far as early tier cavalry goes, they are just a solid unit. They will be able to charge down some of the weaker runic early game units, such as the Daratai Clansmen and the Daratai Warriors, and the Balkoth Tribesmen. Maybe not so much the Aryulad Dragon Guard, but those units that I just listed will be able to get charged down pretty effectively by the Thorn Riders. They have a quite large unit, actually, for cavalry. They have 75 men, which is, I guess, pretty average for a early tier cav unit. So, again, very average across the board for your Thorn units. And the Thorn Patrollers are D tier. They're, once again, kind of average. They have a 7 missile attack with a 6 defense, and it is armor piercing because it's a crossbow. But they're really just not as good. They're quite expensive being cavalry. They cost 670, and you will definitely be training these guys because having ranged cavalry is useful, don't get me wrong. But there's really just nothing that the Thorn Patrollers do that you really need. I mean, sure, they can run down and pick off like weakened units or specific heavy armored units. They are actually quite good for taking down, or at least helping soften up, the Rune bodyguards, which, again, have most of their armor and defense. Or, sorry, they have most of their armor and... They have most of their defense and armor. There we go. They have most of their defense and armor, which means that the 7 missile attack crossbows will do quite good, and they can kite them around the map. So I would say that is actually something that the Thorn Patrollers are really, really good for. But other than that, mounted crossbows, I just think are worse than mounted archers because when you put a ranged unit on cavalry, you reduce the size of the battalion. The Thorn Patrollers only have 75 people. So when they're shooting as slowly as crossbows do, you really, really limit their DPS. So they're not going to be shooting too many arrows at all, even with the higher missile attack. So, and they're also terrible charge cavalry when they're done. They have less charge and less defense than your Thorn Riders. So I would say for picking off runic bodyguards, this is your go-to unit. They will really be able to pick off men from those units. But other than that, they're really just not that special of a unit, even with their mid-league stats. So I would put them in D tier. Then we come on to your Dorwinion infantry. And your Dorwinion infantry are quite good. Your Dorwinion infantry are a solid A tier because you can get them before the barracks event in version 4.5, which is so useful. And they're quite a fantastic unit. They have a 5% movement speed buff. They have a 5 melee attack, which isn't anything special. They have less than your Thorn Bladesman, but they have a 15 defense, which is quite substantial for the early game, which means they will hold the line incredibly well against anything that Rune will be able to throw at you in the early game. They're also an anti-cavalry unit that doesn't rely on spear wall, so they're quite good for taking out the Aryulad Dragon Riders that Rune loves to throw at you. So there's a lot of uses for the Dorwinion infantry. They also look amazing. I like the dark purple with the big kite shield, I believe it's called, which is really cool. The Dorwinion infantry are just such a useful unit for you in the early game. And even after the barracks event, 515 is not a terrible stat line by any means. Most early game sort of spear and shield units for human factions usually have around only a 3 or 4 melee attack, and then they have maybe a 12 or 13 defense. So the 5 melee attack and the 15 defense is quite good for an early tier unit. They are quite limited into the early game. I believe they have slower training until you hit the barracks event, at least in version 4.5. But you're going to want to train these guys every single opportunity you can. They also are very expensive with a 715 cost. But once again, you're Dorwinion. Your economy is not that big of a problem. You're definitely going to want these guys. They can really take an absolute pounding for you and hold up the line incredibly well. And they'll be useful throughout the game for you. and especially getting them in the early tiers makes them a phenomenal unit. Now we have the Dorwinion Armsmen. The Dorwinion Armsmen are decent, but they are strike infantry, which is super, super useful for you. They have a 14 melee attack, which is quite substantial, with an 8 charge, and then 18 defense, 12 of which is in armor, so don't let them come into armor piercing, don't let them get shot by, say, the runic crossbows. But they have a 14-18 stat line, which makes them incredibly aggressive. They will carve through anything that is unarmored in Rune's roster. So, say any lower tier units that are in Rune's armies, like any of the Daratai or the Dragon Guard, they will really do a number on those, and they're just a great unit all around, but there's nothing that makes them stand out enough to get into A tier, but I would definitely say they're above average. They are still a solid unit. They're not too terribly expensive, and you get quite a lot of them. So overall, quite a useful unit. I also love the look with the shield on their back, and the purple and the chainmail. Again, they have the similar look to the Dorwinion infantry. So the Dorwinion Armsmen are just quite a solid two-handed sword unit. They're the only two-handed sword unit that you get, but they are definitely overshadowed by another strike infantry that you get later in your Regent Axe Guard. But overall, they're a solid unit. I should say, the way I have this arranged is I'm going to do all of the humans first and then the elves. I'm not going to go through the tiers just because I think that'll be more confusing. So all of the humans will get tiered, then all of the elves will get tiered. So now we have the Regent units, starting with the Regent Spear Guard. And the Regent Spear Guard, in my opinion, are a C tier. And I know you're probably wondering why. What? They have decent stats. They have a 6 attack and a 20 defense. Yes, they have decent stats, and they have better stats than your Dorwinion infantry, but there's really not much that makes them stand out as opposed to your Dorwinion infantry for getting them a lot later and more limited, because they do come after the barracks event. They don't get the 5% movement speed buff that the Dorwinion infantry get. They cost substantially more, about 140 gold coins more. They cost 855, and they don't upgrade by that much. 6 attack and 20 defense. Yes, is substantially better in the defense at least than the Dorwinion infantry. But the Regent Spear Guard, I don't know. I just don't see them being that much better than the Dorwinion infantry. They are a better unit, and they will hold the line better, but they won't kill that much more, and you get them after the barracks event, unlike the Dorwinion infantry. So you're probably not going to be using these guys as much as the Dorwinion infantry, just because of how readily available your Dorwinion infantry are and how much cheaper they are. They might even have a bigger unit. Let's see. Dorwinion infantry. Yes, the Dorwinion infantry do have a bigger unit. They have a 65-man battalion in the EDU, whereas the Regent Spear Guard have a 60-man battalion. So you get more for the Dorwinion infantry, 5 less defense, 1 less attack, but more movement speed. You get them earlier in the game. You get them significantly cheaper, and more men. So I think overall, while it's a slightly better unit on paper than the Dorwinion infantry, you're going to be using these a lot more, which is why these get into C tier. They just don't stand out enough to really warrant training this unit all the time until you're in the late game. Now we have the Regent Axe Guard, and the Regent Axe Guard are quite good, and they are A tier. They are probably the best unit that you can get on the human side because they are armor piercing, as I just mentioned. They have an 8 melee attack with a 15 defense. So they have worse stats all around than your Dorwinion Armsmen, but they're armor piercing, and I cannot stress enough how much armor these Loke units have. Let's see, if I go Loke Rim Bodyguard, have 15 armor. If I go to Loke Gamp Rim, they have 10 armor. If I go to Flag Rim, they have also 10 armor. So that is a lot of armor that these guys can shred through to really lower the defense of the Loke units that Rune gets. And they have quite a high charge bonus. If I go back to the Regent Axe Guard, the Regent Axe Guard have a 6 charge bonus as well. So yes, they are quite aggressive, and they have substantially lower attack on paper than your Armsmen and a lower charge bonus. But the armor piercing is just everything you need for fighting Rune, and of course fighting Rune is the biggest task as Dorwinion. So doing so is just so important for you. And that makes the Dorwinion Axe Guard one of your best units. They're definitely not an S tier because in terms of stats, they're not anywhere close to the best strike infantry in the game. So they definitely don't get into S tier, but in terms of usefulness, Dorwinion Axe Guard are just so important. You train these guys whenever you can, and you throw them in against the golden units of Rune. So useful. Then we come to the Regent Bowguard, who wield a crossbow despite being Bowguard. So we go to the Regent Bowguard. I can't find them. There we go. Okay. Regent Bowguard are just quite good crossbows, but they're still nothing amazing. They have a 10 missile attack, which is quite good, but nothing amazing for crossbows. I would say anything double digits for crossbows is very good, and then above 12 is when you really get the big boys for crossbows. So they're a decent crossbow, again armor piercing, not very good in melee when they're done with their crossbows, though they only have 6 melee attack, and they do have 15 defense. So they're quite comparable to your Dorwinion infantry in melee. So they're okay, I guess, in melee, but nothing special at all. But again, armor piercing is so important against Rune. Really is what you need to be able to take down those heavily armored gold Loki units that Rune can field. But there's nothing that makes them super amazing in terms of crossbows. They still only have 10 missile attack, which is quite good, but still not amazing. I should mention that these Regent units also still look phenomenal, especially the Axe Guard. I don't know what it is with their shield on their back, the pink cloak. It's just such a cool look. And I also love the mask on their helmet. The Bowguard and the Spear Guard also look great. The purple shield, the shield on the back of the Bowguard. So overall, the Regent units look really good, so they do get some nice points for that. But the Regent Bowguard are a very good unit. They're a very good crossbow unit, and it's definitely one I like using whenever I play Dorwinion to take out the Loke units. But there's nothing that makes them one of your best units or one of the best crossbow units in the game. So they're just an above average unit. They're good. Now we have the Paladins. Not the High Paladins. Let's see. The Vintner... Oh, that's the cavalry unit. What are these guys called? The Vintner Court Knights. That's what they are. The Knights. The Vintner Court Knights are a phenomenal sword and board unit, and one of your best units, or your best infantry unit, if you side with the humans for Dorwinion. They have a 12 melee attack, which is quite high, and they have a 25 defense. They get over 20 defense, which is your only unit other than the Spear Guard, who get up to 20. But the Vintner Court Knights can kill a lot with their 12 melee attack, and they can hold up incredibly well with their well-distributed 25 defense, 14 of which is in armor, so they're quite vulnerable to armor piercing. So watch out for Loke Flagrim or the Loke Bodyguards. But they do still have 6 defense skill and 5 shield, which makes them just a very solid unit. They're not too outrageously expensive, costing 1,200 gold coins, which as far as elites go is not terrible. It doesn't get up to 1,500 or anything like that. They also look amazing. I love the plate armor that they have. Overall, just a very solid unit. Your best human infantry unit on paper. But still definitely not one of the best sword and board units in the game. They're nothing like the Arthedain Knights that we looked at way back in the Northern Dunedain video. Now we come on to your, I think they're Athala Rangers for you, I believe. Yes, Athala Rangers, which of course are in the Dale roster, but they have a 6 missile attack, which is so good. 240 meter range. I believe Athala Rangers are the longest range archer unit in the game. And 6 missile attack is still very good. 12 defense, nothing really stands out there. Only 6 of which is in armor, so they're quite vulnerable to getting shot. Like all Rangers, they don't have a very big unit size. But again, they like all Rangers, they have a movement speed bonus and can hide anywhere. But with all this being said, Athala Rangers are a B tier unit for you as Dorwinion. Now, if this was Dale, they would be an A tier unit, but for Dorwinion, they're a B tier because you cannot get them early game like Dale can. You have to wait till the barracks event and you've made your human elf choice to be able to get the Athala Rangers as Dorwinion, which means you're not going to be training these guys as much as Dale. Also, Dale is going to have pretty much all their provinces be in the region where the Athala Rangers can be trained, in that Rovanian sort of area. It's not just Rovanian, but it's generally the Rovanian area. Whereas you're going to be taking some of Dorwinion and then also pushing east a lot towards the Sea of Rune, obviously fighting Rune. So you're not going to be getting the Athala Rangers nearly as much. And 6 missile attack for a late game archer is good, but not great. It's about middling as far as elite humans go. They do have 32 missiles. They do have 240 meter range, which is phenomenal. Absolutely amazing. 240 meter range means they are shooting from so far away. But there's nothing about the Athala Rangers that makes them one of your best units, especially because they're not going to be the most readily available. But they're still definitely an above average unit. They're very, very, very good. I also love the black cloaks that they have. They look super, super cool. In my opinion, the coolest looking Rangers in the game. So that definitely gives them a boost. But they're an above average unit, but they're not one of your best for the human choice. And then finally, we have the Paladins. And the Vintner Court Paladins are a solid cavalry unit. They have a 12 melee attack with a 7 charge bonus and a 23 defense, which means they will stick around for a while, and this makes them another A tier unit. Now, stat-wise, geez, my cavalry UIs really do not look too good. I apologize for that. But anyway, as far as cavalry unit goes, they're actually not amazing. They only have a sword. They do not have a lance or a spear, which means their charge is hindered slightly. And stat-wise, 23 defense is decent for late-game cavalry, and 12 attack is all right, but 7 charge is really not that good. They have a heavier horse, so that means they move 5% slower as well. So in terms of stats, they're not an amazing cavalry unit, but sort of the same as the Aradonayam with the Naranara Royal Knights. The what are they called? The Vintner Court Paladins are just easily your best cavalry unit that you get for charging. They're so much better than your Thorn Riders. So you're definitely going to be wanting to train your Vintner Court Paladins every single opportunity that you get. So that makes them an A tier unit for you. Also, I just love the look of these. The horse armor looks amazing with the pink accents, the plate armor on the rider. The Vintner Court Paladins really just look phenomenal. Whoever made this model did a great job. So overall, a phenomenal unit, but definitely not one of the best cav units in the game. Stat-wise, they're definitely B tier. But for what they give you, for what they offer as a unit for Dorwinion, they're one of your best units. So definitely an A tier. They are your best charging cavalry in your entire roster, because of course the horse archers that the Avari get don't charge as well as your Vintner Court Paladins. So now we're going to go on to the Elven side of the choice, and we have first the Avari Spearmen. And the Avari Spearmen are good. They are quite good. They have a 9 missile attack because, of course, they have a javelin with a 65 meter range, which as far as javelins go is pretty fantastic. They get 3 of them, so that's 1 more than 2. It is an armor-piercing javelin. 9 missile attack, definitely not amazing as far as javelins go, but is still very, very good. And with 3 at 65 meter range, will do quite a lot of damage. Then they have a 9 melee attack, and they have 21 defense. So, you know why I called the Spear Guard lackluster as well, because they were not that much of an upgrade over the Dorwinion infantry. Well, the Avari Spearmen are a substantial upgrade over the Dorwinion infantry, so they are definitely still going to be an A-tier unit. Substantial upgrade. You're definitely going to be wanting to train these guys in the late game. They are elves, so they get 10% movement speed bonus. They have amazing morale because they're elves. Armor-piercing javelin toss before being amazing spearmen and melee. Fairly small unit, and of course they're elves, so they have limited recruitment, and they're more expensive than your Regent Spear Guard. But they're actually not terribly expensive. They're about 1,050, which is good. It's not 1,200, I would say, is where it gets really expensive, and then under 1,000, of course, is cheap. So I'd say 1,050 for an elite unit, a solid Elven post-barracks event unit is definitely good. So, as I said, they're amazing spearmen when they're done. 921 is about as good as your knights, your Vintner Court knights. So, having the javelin on top of that, yes, they're spear units, so it's not as good against infantry and everything, but they get the bonus against mounts as well. There's just so much going for the Avari Spearmen. One of your best units that Dorwinion has at all. I mean, the Avari are generally really, really stacked in terms of what they offer, despite having a limited roster. But I'm debating putting them S tier just because of how good they are with the javelins, but they're definitely not anything close to best in class, and they don't have anything that makes them look super phenomenal. I mean, they look great. I love the chainmail on the Avari, but there's nothing that makes them one of the best units in the game. But they're definitely one of the best units in Dorwinion's roster, period. I mean, the javelins and the spears, just so good. Now we have the Avari Warriors, and of course the Avari Warriors are being changed in version 5 to be a sword and board unit, but currently they are a two-handed sword unit with a 13 attack, 6 charge, and 19 defense, which is pretty comparable to your Dorwinion Armsmen, just the elf version of it. I would say compared to your Spearmen, they are a significantly worse unit. Yes, they do have a lot more attack. They have the 13 attack, and 19 defense is comparable, so they're not too much worse. They're better in melee, I would say, than your Dorwinion Spearmen, but they obviously lack the Javelin. They also get a Malice against all kinds of mounts. They are faster because they have their elves, so the elves get the 10% movement speed buff. But I would say where the Avari Spearmen are a fantastic unit, the Avari Warriors are just a decent unit. They will still be your best strike infantry as the elves for the entire game, because they're the only strike infantry you get as the elves. But there's just nothing that makes them stand out. So they're a B tier unit. They're good. They're good. You're going to train a lot of them. You're going to want them every single time you get, and they're an above average unit in the grand scheme of things. But compared to your Avari Spearmen and the units up in A tier, they definitely don't make the cut. Now we come to the Avari Shadows, who are your Elven Ranger unit, and this unit has some incredible stats. First of all, they have a 15% movement speed buff, so they're faster than even your other elves. They get an 8 missile attack, which is quite good. Quite good. 8 missile attack is definitely on par with upper tier elves, not elite elves, but high tier elves, like any post-barrack event elven unit. 8 missile attack is right on par. 220 meter range, so they're like, they have ranger sort of range, 32 missiles, amazing accuracy. They have pretty bad defense. They have 15 defense, 7 of which is in armor, so just like your Thala Rangers, they're quite vulnerable to missiles. So you don't want them to get shot, and they have a small unit just like your Thala Rangers, but they still have incredible stats for archery with 220 meter range, 32 missiles, 8 missile attack. They're just such a good unit. Definitely going to want to train these every single opportunity that you get. They will be one of your primary archer units along with your Morquindi Sentinels. Definitely not great in melee. They do have an 8 melee attack, which is pretty good, pretty aggressive, 15 defense. So they're decent in melee. You know, they're better than, say, the Dorwinion infantry, but definitely not as good as the other Avari units, and they're quite squishy when they get shot. So I would say they're more on the lower side of A tier, where the Avari Spearmen are on the higher side. But still nothing that makes them the absolute like upper echelon. But they're definitely not bad. They're just a good archer. A good archer. 8 missile attack will really kill a lot of things. And that's what you want. Say the Gamp Rim, who don't have a shield, even with their high armor value, they'll definitely get taken out pretty easily by the Avari Shadows. Now we have one of the game's best units. We have the Morquindi Protectors, and there is no doubt in my mind at all that the Morquindi Protectors are an easy S tier. Easy. First of all, the look of this unit. The red cloaks, the mask I believe they have, the golden plate armor. The Morquindi Protectors are one of the best looking units in the game. They just are so gorgeous. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's look at the stats, shall we? 5% movement speed buff, which is less than your other elves, but that makes sense because they're wearing more armor and they have a big pole in their hands. 8 melee attack. And I know that people that probably don't play this game that much are like, 8 melee attack, that's really not that good. That's the same as your Avari Shadows. Yes, but to calculate the attack effectively for a pike unit, we're going to triple the attack stat. So 24 attack. Let's put it at 24 attack for these Morquindi Protectors with a 24 defense. They are so sturdy, 15 of which is an armor, 9 defense skill, very balanced defensive utility, which means the 15 armor will make them stand up very, very well to arrows. The 9 defense skill means that they're not too vulnerable to armor piercing. These things are just so stalwart. They have a decent unit size. I think they have 101 men in the battalion, which for a pike unit is what you would want. That means they can line up in a two deep line and hold a large choke point. These things will never die if they get attacked head-on by infantry. That's all I can say. Also, don't even talk about cavalry. I'm looking at the bonuses right now. They get a +8 against horses. +8. So that means their attack doubles against horses. The more Quinty Protectors are one of the best units in the game, alongside the 1st Legion of Khazad-dûm and the Elder Enway Tierno, I believe it is, for the High Elves. And Pike units are some of the best infantry Pikes are one of the best infantry classes in the game, in my opinion, and the more Quinty Protectors are just phenomenal. They are so good. They will never die. They will kill so many things. If you've ever played as Dorwinion, you know the power that the more Quinty Protectors have. They are one of the best units in the game, period, as far as infantry goes, and they have a phenomenal look. They will hold the line forever. There is just nothing else to say. They will hold the line forever. Such a good unit. And now the Morquendi Sentinels, which, again, are going to be a very solid A-tier unit. They are just incredible archers. They have a 9 missile attack, so 1 up from your shadows. They have the same unit size. They have a 5% movement speed buff, so the same speed as the Morquendi Protectors. They have a slightly shorter range with 210 range, 32 missiles, which is even, and they probably have comparable accuracy as well. But they're the biggest difference, because in terms of archers, they don't stand out too much from your Avari Shadows, but they're significantly more expensive. This unit is $1350 in cost, which is so expensive. But the difference is their melee stats. They have a 9 melee attack with a 6 charge and a 24 defense, once again, just like your Morquendi Protectors, which makes your Morquendi Sentinels an amazing melee unit after they're done with their bows, and they're also a very good archer unit. They are right up there with the best of the elves. Say we have the Elven King's Bowguard, I think it's called, for Woodland Realm. They changed the names. They used to be called the Hiri Bang. I don't know what they changed them to, but slightly worse than that unit. They're about on par with the Mirkwood Sentinels, I think they are. There's the elite archers for the high elves. They're about on par with high tier elven archers, is basically my point. They're not reaching the upper echelons by any means, but they are fantastic archers and fantastic in melee. They also look amazing with, again, the gold plate, the red hoods, and everything. This is also the bodyguard of Nurway, and Nurway is an incredible general. Whenever I play Dorwinion, Nurway carries the game pretty hard. And so the Morquendi Sentinels are just such a good unit. You're definitely going to train these every single time you get the opportunity, as with any of your Elven units, really. I mean, that's kind of part of playing Elves, is you train your units when you can. The Morquendi Sentinels are just so good. They really can kill a lot of things with their bows and in melee. Now, lastly, we have the Avari Nahirim. And the Avari Nahirim are just pretty solid horse archers. They have a 7 missile attack, 30 missiles, only 140 meter range, but all horse archers have less range. Then they have a 9 melee attack with 17 defense, 6 charge, which makes them definitely better cavalry than your Thorn Guard. But they're still a B tier, in my opinion. As far as horse archers go, they're not amazing. Actually, no, I'm going to move them up to A tier for the same reason as your Vintnor Court Paladins, in that as far as horse archers go, they're not incredible. They're very good. I mean, 7 missile attack is still good, 30 missiles, good accuracy. And then 9 charge, 17 defense means that they can kill things when they're done with their bows. And the 30 missiles is actually the thing that really carries the Avari Nahirim, is that will be shooting their bows for quite a long time, which is really good. But just as far as horse archers go in general, they're not amazing, but they're definitely your best cavalry. They're so much better than your Thorn Patrollers, and they're still a lot better than your Thorn Riders. So you're definitely going to want to be training these whenever you can. They're one of your best units. They will be your best cavalry unit if you choose the Elves. And cavalry is what wins battles in Medieval 2. And having a horse archer to supplement is just quite good. They will get a lot of kills. They're a very good unit. But I would say they're more like the Avari Shadows, and that they're on the lower end of A tier, not like the Morquendi and the Spearmen, where these guys are like pushing S tier. So that is to be said. But I do really like the look again with the Elven Chainmail and the bow. Really nice looking unit. Now, finally, we have the High Paladins, the Bodyguard. The High Paladins, as far as bodyguards go, they're good. They're not average. I don't think they're terrible. They're also not amazing. They're not one of the best bodyguard units in the game. They're definitely not A tier as far as bodyguards go. but they're better than some bodyguards. They're a solid two-handed sword unit. 14 attack and 6 defense is quite aggressive, and then they do have a 14 attack and 6 charge with a 25 defense, 14 of which is in armor, so once again, be careful of the armor-piercing units that Rune gets. But Rune doesn't get too many armor-piercing units. It's mostly in the Loke Flag Rim and their crossbows. And they will really just kill a lot of things. I mean, there's really nothing else to say. They're just a good unit. As far as bodyguards go, they're not amazing, but they're not average. They're good. So they get a solid B tier. And that will wrap up the Dorwinion tier list. Quite a quality roster. You know, their mid-early tier is very, very average as far as units go, and then the Spear Guard is just quite an average unit. But as you get into their upper tiers, they start to become quite a solid roster. Very well-rounded. Dorwinion doesn't have a lot of gaps in their roster. They've got, I would say if they have one weakness, it's cavalry, but they still get solid cavalry options on both sides. Archers are definitely a weakness for the human side because you only get one archer unit, and then the Athala Rangers, which are quite limited. But you get a very solid crossbow unit. There's strike infantry, which I would say is the weakness for the elves, because the elves actually really struggle with armor piercing. You're going to be wanting to train some of your crossbows just to get some armor piercing on the field as the elves. But the elves are just quite quality in terms of stats. You know, they will just outclass Rune, and the Morquindi Protectors are just one of the best units in the game. They have very fine archers, great cavalry archers, and then the humans just have very diverse options. They have something for everything. You know, there's no situation where you will find yourself without a unit for the humans. Also, just a very good-looking roster. You know, the reds, the golds, the pinks, the purples, just a lot of color in the Dorwinion roster, which I just love. Every unit looks great except for the Vineyard units, which are pretty plain. So overall, I just really, really like Dorwinion. They're one of my favorite factions. I played them on both sides. They're super, super fun, in my opinion. So yeah, that's been the Dorwinion tier list. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I'll see you all later.